All right. So what are we here to talk about? Critical controls, critical control management, and effective implementation, and maybe taking a little leaf out of Matt's book there, some practical aspects to that as well. So like I start with every webinar, the three gets, how are you going to take notes? So I'm recording this as well, so you have a repository to come back to, but if you're going to scribble some notes or things like that, get rid of any of the distractions, 40 minutes, 45 minutes of content sharing. So if you can, just mute your notifications or flick, turn them off or turn your phone over, that'd be great, and jump into state ready for an avalanche of information. So you've already seen that I'm keen to keep this interactive, ask lots of questions to understand where people are at, and obviously everyone's answers helps the collective. So we'll give you 30 seconds. If a frontline worker came up to you and said, "What's a critical control?" What would be your one-liner? How would you respond? How can you articulate what these things are? Because everyone's got an interpretation. What would you say? So just jump in the chat. There's no right or wrong. And again, an opportunity to learn. Gianluca, that's a good start, mate. Without this control, your life could change. Yeah, that's a nice one. What do other people use? Darren, a critical control is something that stops you getting killed. Yep. Nice. Gabby, keep you and your team safe from harm. Yes. Just letting other people in. What else? What have other people got? What's your one-liner? What's a critical control? Shannon, a control to mitigate fatality risks. It could be mitigate, could also prevent as well. Yep. What else? Gee, I'm not sure who that is. An irreversible outcome. Yep, that's where the controls are related to. What else? What's your one-liners? Well, we'll give two more people, what's critical control? Because we want to get on the same page. You're going to get asked by the workforce potentially, or you've got to communicate it out to the workforce. So how do you cut through all of the gaff to give them something? See if someone else can jump something in there. Everyone's a bit shy, but I'll keep an eye on the chat. I can see it off to the left there, letting some people in. So look, there are lots of definitions. So Paul, systems reduce the hazards when within the workplace underground. Just about every company that we go to and work with, they've got a different slant on it. I've taken this from the International Council of Mining Metals Good Practice Guide, which they shared, gosh, I think it's about 2016. Not a bad starting point. For us at Impress Solutions, we've evolved this somewhat, but this is it. So, it's a control that meets one or more of these, or is criteria, if I use that. And what's an example? So think about your current organization. Does someone want to share a critical control that is in place, or they're calling a critical control? Just again, to help back this up. I'm sure we've all got some level of familiarity. So what's some of the ones that we got going around the place at the moment from the people online? What's one of yours, or one you've seen, if not one at your current workplace? Lockout, no person under suspended load. Yep, pretty clear. Mobile equipment isolation, sleep and fatigue device. Yep. That's an interesting one. Yes. Anyone else got something to share? What's one more? Thank you. Thank you, Bretna. Good to see you again, mate. Buns, star control. Thanks, Shannon. Explosives. Well, we'll assume, Paul, that's the risk. There might be some controls in and around that. Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Thank you. And so the impact, if we don't get it right, well, we've already associated with something that we don't want to happen, and ideally it's a big deal. Yeah, so be it a single fatality, multiple fatality, don't want those things to happen. Shannon, edge protection, thanks, mate. There might be also environmental consequences. There could be legal and regulatory, reputation, you name it. So these big things, which ideally are called critical risk. And if we think about where are we as an industry with critical control management, or critical controls, is there a problem? If there is a problem, what's that look like? Thank you, Paul. Full of ground. Yeah, so clearly there's still a problem. How do we know that to be true? look at, unfortunately, fatalities. There's been, I think, 3 or 4 in Queensland mining, which I'm quite attached to in just this year to date. You know, people dying at work, significant incidents, repeat incidents, all of that. So we know that these things we still haven't yet nailed, and there could be a whole host of reasons for that. And what my promise is today is I'm going to go through some key ideas and concepts that, if you get your head around, you're able to implement or move forwards, will help us on that journey to better management of these critical controls. So I know a fair few on the line, but some of them don't know. So yeah, my name's Christian Young. I had Impress Solutions for the last 5 years, been in mining safety, or let's say industrial safety, for almost 23 now, and helped a lot of clients, which you can see here in the critical risk space. And we currently have some big projects on the go, which I'm able to give some real-time stuff. And also what I'm able to share here is some knowledge from the collective, as opposed to just the one. So yeah, I love this stuff. The push-ups, and some of you have heard this before, when I'm reflecting on things, an will pop out, and I have a bet with my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, who thinks she's about 26, that it's 5 push-ups for each arm. So I'm moving through that. I'll use CCs for critical controls, or CCM for critical control management, to keep it short. I'm going to move fast, and there's going to be a lot of questions from myself back to you, to, 1, keep it engaging, but 2, prompt you to think about some aspects as well. It's not a monologue, it's dialogue. So the content, this is what I'm going to cover off. Ensure that there's plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And obviously in a 40-minute slot, I can't cover everything around critical control management or anything I'd love to share. So at the end, I'll talk about what you can do if you want more information in this space. And at the end, I'll mention how you can get a copy of the slides and recording, and a little bit of a free bonus in there as well. Okay, so we've reflected on what is a critical control, or how could we articulate it. What are you seeing is the sticking point? Where are we failing? Why aren't they working? Now, interested in your insights, either from your current organization, your personal opinions, from industry. So we're clear that they're not doing what they should as well as we would like them. So what's going wrong? Now, what's the sticking point? Where are we breaking? So give you 30 seconds now. Just jump in the chat. What are you seeing? This is the hardest part about getting this nailed. You know, where are the bits that aren't working? All right, Shannon, critical control checklists are too long and don't contain actual critical controls. Mate, that's an awesome one. Thank you for that. Gianluca, lack of understanding and knowledge. Geez, I can't keep up now. Workforce, yes. Poor planning. Paul again. Second Paul, information overload. Documents too large. Sure, we could talk about that one tomorrow. Good to see you. Volume of work associated process seem to be administrative, Darren. Controls that are not clear or too hard to comply with, so people find a workaround. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Shannon, not effectively implementing following SHMS. Yes, applicable to everyone. Amber, confusion in relation to the difference to hierarchy of controls. Yep, MC, not sure who that is, can be a big job to define. Yes, and implement. Overconfidence is the way we do things. Aaron, separating out critical controls from critical monitoring activities. Worker retention. That's applied to everyone. Matt, it's one thing to find a CC, it's another thing to ensure they're effective, reliable, and available. I love that terminology. Thanks, Matt. That's close to my heart. W, buy-in and ownership at all levels. Yeah. Brendan, the better you do it, the bigger the task to implement and manage. Yeah, that's interesting. Steve A, good to see you, mate. Level and type of training provided to frontline workers. Yes. Brett, no, defining support activities and verification activities. Showing oversimplification. Thank you very much. That's some awesome stuff. I can't get close to all of that. Maybe the question and answer, we can come back and start to riff off some of those things. So we're all close to it. We understand there's some challenges. And what I want to point out here, you know, this slide might blow you away, complex and everything like that. What this is showing, and this is what we have in our two-day masterclass, is essentially the full critical risk management framework, from identification of critical risks, analysis, controls, implementation, and everything like that. And what I just want to make sure we're all on the same page is, we're only talking today about critical controls, which is about essentially how we go about ensuring, are they critical? Are they the right controls? And so there's a lot of assumptions there. So we're assuming that all of this upstream work, one, is in place, and two, is effective. So for example, things like broad brush risk assessments, clear hazard descriptions for that risk in the context of the business. We've got bow ties in place for all of those critical risks. So we know if we have those, then we've got a better chance at critical controls. If we don't have those, we've got lesser chance. And if we do these poorly, then potentially it has big impacts on here. So can I just do a quick poll of yes, no? Whose organisations have a broad brush risk assessment in place and has bow ties in place and has done that risk identification piece and analysis piece, and it's a nice flow into this space. So a quick yes, no, just around the ground so I can get a bit of a feel for what people have got. All right, so we've got mostly yeses, a few no's. Yep. BBRA and only bow tie, not quite at this stage. And I think it's John Paul in place currently. We have done some bow ties. Yes, that's right. I remember you guys saying that. So that's important to keep in mind because it's, we can get this bit schmick, but if this stuff isn't working, then no good. And same with the downstream stuff after that. Shane, yes, currently rolling out data PHPs, critical controls from BBR. And all right, thank you. Currently, and some people are defining support activities. All right, so now let's jump into some content. So let's start thinking about some of these three pillars there. Thanks for those there. So one of the ideas here, and I see this, well, you wouldn't be surprised how often I see this, is an organization says, hey, here's my list of critical controls. And then when I cast my eye across it, some of them don't even meet the criteria of being a control in and of itself. And I wonder if some of you on the line have seen that, or that might be close to home. So here's an example of some critical controls from an organization. So what do people think about this list? Does anything come to mind just looking at it? Good, not good? If it's not good, can anyone think of a reason why? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Can you see a problem or all good? So imagine if this is your list of critical controls that you now had to implement within your organization. So Nick, in some areas, yes, in others, no. Russell, not specific and measurable. And NCO, I don't know who that is, but thank you. Too broad and not specific enough. Matt G, too vague, too broad. Another Matt, vague. Yeah, look, you guys are getting it. And Russell, you touched on one of the aspects here. How can you have a critical control if it's not even a control? And this is some of the things we see, the verifications are so broad. Sometimes we have a grouping of controls like we just saw there, permit to work, that's our critical control. So then you can imagine the poor old frontline worker, what are the critical controls? Tell me what the critical control is. And they're like, oh, they might name a life-saving rule or something like that. And where we want to be, or where you want to be, absolute clarity on critical controls. And therefore, the verification process that fell out of that was detailed and specific. And therefore, our frontline workers know clearly what's critical and what's critical to them. So some of you might have seen this, some information bandied about. So there's one of the ideas that if you have a control, it ideally falls into one of three categories here. It's either a human act, or it's a passive object, if you like. So an object that's in place and doesn't require a human to do something, or a technological system, which is a combination of an act and an object. So for example, an act might be, for whatever reason, 3 points of contact. An object might be automated fire alarm sensors, and a system could be, an example is a seatbelt, where we've got an object, which is the seatbelt reel and device and all of that. And the human action is, well, I need to wear the seatbelt. So that's a combination. And then the bit which we do less well at, and I've been guilty of this in the past, so I'm not going to cast any stones. I'm helping industry move forwards. Is this one specific, specifiable, measurable, and auditable, and defined within a management system? And this one here intended to arrest or mitigate an unwanted event. So a quick poll, yes, no. if you took your current list of critical controls and applied this, let's say this was an audit framework, just doesn't meet the definition of control, would it pass? Yes, no. So would your critical control descriptions meet all of these requirements? It's just quick poll. There's lots on the line. It's pretty easy. Just yes, no. Thank you. Seeing some no's, some, but not all from Paul. Tamara, no. Russell, yes. Yes, I'm still letting some other people in. No's. Braden, no. Mick W, no. Paul, yes. Shannon, yes. Okay. Darren, no. Okay. Thank you for those who shared. Brendo, some. All right, so you're middle of the park. Okay, so we're seeing there's an opportunity for improvement straight away, even before we start solving these things about critical controls and critical control verification. So let's say now it's passed the test and it meets the definition. Then there's an interesting area here around, well, is this thing that I've described a control? And I like to use the term a true control, or is it a support activity, a verification activity, or potentially not even part of the control management system? So here's some examples of let's say some controls or potentially critical controls. And let's play around with, for example, induction. So if I took induction the way it's described and came to my flowchart and said, is it a human act, object, or system? Well, the way it's described, it's not specific, measurable, and audible. I have to say no, it's not, because I can't fathom, I can't take it any further. Then move it over here. Isn't an activity that maximizes the health and minimizes the erosion of a control? Let's say it is a fairly good induction, and look, it covers off our critical controls and critical hazards. Okay. Is the activity specifiable, observable, and auditable? Well, the way I've described it, no. And we're a bit loose. We're not sure. We got induction there, but not everyone gets passed through it. So I've no. Then I come back over here. Is it an in-field check? The control is implemented? No, it's not. And I've come out over here, not part of a control management system. Now, it's a training example, pretty raw and a first pass, but even that run through, hopefully you're starting to see that some of these traditional controls, forget if they're critical or not, that we've relied on, potentially aren't true controls. They might be a support activity or verification activity. Quick question to the group. Is there any, just looking at this layout, is there any controls that you can think of that, looking here, aren't true controls, but either your organization or in your experience, it's been bandied around as a control? Does anything come to mind? I know it's a bit of a technical question, but really interested if anyone can see anything here, just thinking about this framework. So does anything come to mind that was previously called a control, look at this framework and worked out, well, actually, no, it's a support activity. It might be a verification activity, or it's none of those. Gianluca, training. Yeah, classic, mate. Training. As soon as I see training, I think here that training is a support activity. Thanks, mate. Has anyone else got anything that they can think of that might? Russell, inductions, hazard reporting, inspections. Yep. Yes. So anything, when I see the terms of inspections, monitorings, reports, on external expert stuff, I'm thinking verification activities. Paul, take fives. Ooh, you mentioned the dirty word. Don't get me started on that one, mate. There's an interesting article distributed recently about the efficacy of take fives, and I'm sure not all of us are going to be good. Paul, you've read it. Cool. Okay. We'll leave it there. Okay, quick anecdote. So we worked with a client who had a suite of bow ties. So they've done that broad brush risk assessment process. They had some bow ties in place, and at first pass, so the bow tie looks all right, doesn't it? You know, lots of causes, lots of pathways, lots of layers, defenses in depth and everything like that. And what we did is we then took what we just talked about. So does it pass the criteria to be a control in and of itself? And if it does, then is this a support activity, monitoring activity, or not part of the suite, or is it a true control? What do you think we found when we applied those principles to this existing bow tie? Anyone want to hazard a guess? So we applied some criteria. John H, 80% of it disappeared. Ooh, pretty good. Shannon, it reduced in size. John, percentage. Yep. Yeah, you guys are on the mate. Yeah, materiality changed. So you're on the money, applying these simple frameworks. All of a sudden, what the organisation thought was in place and how good they thought they were going, not so much. And then obviously what was triggered as an action? Okay, well, if there's a control that doesn't meet the definition, then we need to do a reword, a rebadge, or do we just pull it out and we put something else in? So it was the right type of work. And just again, applying these simple models and principles. So a quick poll, 1 to 10. We've just gone through some ideas and some content. Where would you rate your organisation in terms of the critical controls, meet the definition of control, and is a true control as opposed to something else? Just quick round the grounds. Gianluca, 3. That's nice and honest, mate. Got a 7, an 8, and a 5 from Nick. Russell, an 8. Darren, 5. Brett Nair, 7. Shane's an 8. Thank you, Tom Mo. I'm going to guess 7, 5. Shannon, 4. There's a 5 maybe. 5, 6 from Dennis. Okay, good. And it's good that no one did a 0.5 because you got to either go down or go up to get to that. Okay, so rounding out this bit. So what I've gone through is the impacts if we don't have true critical controls. I've talked about 2 ideas or 2 concepts of how you can get a smart control and how we can make sure it's a true control. And a client who thought their bow ties were all good, we applied those frameworks and they identified actually things aren't as good as they could have been. So what type of impact would it make in your critical control framework or critical control management system if you applied these models? And if it would make a change, then the choice is yours essentially to move forwards, do the work, do the time to get to the right levels, or just continue on as previous and maybe the sins of the past. So rounding this out, ensuring critical controls are smart, true controls is a key foundation for getting critical control management right. So the next idea, how do we select the chosen few? You know, when I think about this, I think back to the Buzz Lightyear movie, whatever, the Toy Story and the claw comes down. But anyway, how are the chosen few selected? So yes, no. Does your organization have an objective process for selecting critical controls? So let's say it's made it all the way through, ticks all the boxes from is it eligible? Is there a repeatable process? So if you swapped out you and your group and then replace it with another group, is there some type of pathway that can be followed? And we've got Dennis, no. Darren, no. John, no. Brent, yes. Gianluca, no. Shannon, no. Russell, yes now. Okay. Tomorrow, not yet. Who else? Easy answer. Easy question. Yes, no. Paul, yes. Matt, yes. However, not always followed. Oh, that's interesting. Brendo, no. Building currently. Okay. So some people are working in progress. And sometimes you might have worked at organizations like this. And this is what I've seen. It's literally like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. We've copied and pasted from somewhere else, or we just said, well, this is what we think we do. We didn't have the time. And we see these sorts of things. You know, there is disagreement on the final list. We don't have a process. We've boiled the ocean, gotten way too many. Some don't pass the test like we just talked about. Paul, that sounds like WA mining. Yeah, I'm doing a bit more work over there, mate. There's some help they need in that space. Or critical controls have a poor level of adequacy. So there's some of the pain areas and where we want to be that the organisation's aligned, top to bottom. These are our critical controls. And we followed an objective process to get there that is kind of repeatable. It's never going to be black and white. That's just not the nature of things, but there's a better chance that it's repeatable. And the organisation, this is a big one for me, certainly in the last few years, we've gone the less is more approach to just getting this right. Darren, often knee-jerk idea when execs meet to discuss an incident. Let's not unpack that one either. Thanks, Darren. Okay, so if you were getting together, you had a group of people in the room and you said, all right, we're now going to take all of these controls and select what's critical. What would be some criteria that you would be guiding the group to consider to get to that point of what is a critical control. Anyone want to share some things that come to mind? You're going to facilitate a group. We've got 30 controls on the table for our critical risk of, I don't know, underground fire. How do we, what are some things that we consider to get down to the critical few? How would you guide that process? Because not all can be critical. So what will be some question sets and criteria there? Matt, level of impact of failure. Yeah, nice. Shannon, use the ICMM flowchart. All right, well, you've done the quick question. That's nice. Darren, what happens if it's not here? Yeah, all good. Darren, what happens if it's not there? Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Tamara, effectiveness of control. Look, I like that. Is it smart? Will someone die or be seriously harmed without the control? That's a nice one. And then considering some data, thanks. I guess that's Tomo. Event frequency rate, ICMM. Yeah. Look, there's a few things there. So if we start down this journey, then the ship's already sailed there about, is it a control? So let's assume it is. And if it isn't, then that's the work to do first. Then there's some other things that we can consider around if it becomes eligible to be a control. And there's some host of words here. Some of you've seen before, one here about how frequently it occurs within the risk assessment itself. I think the visual representation's a little bit easier. So let's say, for example, I call these the tests, so criticality tests. So if I'm on a pathway, so this organization said that autonomous braking is more critical than the other one, so they flag that as potentially being eligible. The singularity test, so if for whatever reason, and hope we're never in this scenario, but if we have a high likelihood cause that could lead to a unwanted event and there's only one control there, then a potential that becomes eligible, so that's a consideration. Absence failure, I think someone might have talked about that. So if that control failed or we took it out of that pathway, is there a higher likelihood that we might get to this point? Like I was saying, the occurrence test, so due to its frequency of occurrence either within a bow tie or across a number of bow ties, then it might become eligible. And moving all of that into, so essentially here's our flowchart. Now someone mentioned the ICMM flowchart, so we've evolved that. I mean, the flowchart's still really good. We've added in some extra parameters to it. Now, I don't have time to run through all of this. That's not the purpose of here. But say, for example, if it doesn't meet the definition of control, we already talked about that. Well, it's not going to make it down the pathway. Don't even move forwards. Same about if it's support activity verification, take it out of the loop. One here, which I'll quickly unpack, is ideally we're doing effectiveness assessments on our controls. Actually, can I do a quick poll? Yes, no? Whose organization does effectiveness assessments on the controls that are in their bow ties? So by effectiveness, it's just, well, how good is this control? Yes, no's. Okay, so we've got a fair few yeses. Thank you. Aaron, yes, design and operational. Aaron, no, not well. Shane's just started. Okay, so that's a key aspect. If you're not doing that, it's an opportunity for improvement. Tomo, yes, adapting the effectiveness review process. Yes, okay, that's good. Darren's giving himself a 5. Nice one, halfway. Because why would we have a control that we said has got low effectiveness or poor effectiveness? Why would we make that eligible as a critical control? It just doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Because we said, well, this control could fail or not be in place 100% of the time. Why would we do that? So that's what we've added in here to our pathway is, does this meet its minimum effectiveness criteria? And then encouraging the organisation to set a threshold. So let's say the organisation might say, look, anything must be minimum light green or darker, so very good adequacy or highly adequate. That's our minimum threshold to continue on left to right. So anyway, so here's an example of the flow chart that we use, and then this is what we're talking about, objective criteria. Okay, so coming back to lesson more, I think you get it. I don't need to ask this question, but hopefully you're aligned. I've seen organizations with too many critical controls and they do them poorly. And I've seen organizations with fewer controls, critical controls, and they do them better. Wouldn't say they're nailing it, but they're doing it better. and not based on any science, just on pure what we've seen in terms of labour, the amount of work created by the number of critical controls you have. Our guidance to our clients is maximum 5 critical controls per critical risk. And if on average, most organisations have somewhere between 30 critical risks, that's getting us up in the order of 150 critical controls, which still is a fairly sizable chunk. When we come across an organisation that has 15 critical controls for 1 critical risk, we have some klaxons going off in the background because we're wondering, well, how effective are they actually doing that? So speaking of 300, yes, there was a client we worked with, had 300 critical controls. And what do you think the quality of their verification process was? What do you think the culture of the poor old critical control verifiers was? Do you think they're engaged in the process? Do you think they saw it as value add? At the end of the month, here's another whole batch of critical controls to go and verify. Yeah, less than adequate, Brad. Yeah, you're spot on. It just was not, everyone was overwhelmed. And unfortunately, the safety team also knew it was an issue. Yeah, Paul, overburden. But how do you unpack that? Especially if it's something that you've inherited previously or everyone's so ingrained in that, how do you wind it back to something that's more manageable and also not introduce risk when you go on that pathway? So pretty much we then went on the pathway and then applied that flow chart, essentially that criteria to their critical controls to go, one, what is a control, what meets the requirements, and then, okay, let's get rid of those or do an adjustment. What's a support activity versus verification activity? All right, let's do control effectiveness assessments. What meet our minimum criteria? Okay, let's go out of that as well. And pretty much halved it down to the 150. And we pretty much just drove. And it's amazing what happens if you just set yourself a ceiling, maximum 5, then it forces the issue to work out what are those critical few. Russell, surprisingly, has been the biggest challenge for my organisation. Yeah, absolutely. So we got it down to 150, and you can imagine it was a breath of fresh air. Everyone could just relax because, okay, now it's something that we can manage. We've pretty much halved the work. So big tick and a bit of work to do. Certainly unwinding it, and I'll talk about that another time. All right, so self-assessment time again, number out of 10. Where does your organisation sit in relation to have an objective process? And then I've gone through some other considerations on that process. So considering that as well, how would you score yourself or your organisation, not yourself, out of 10? Russell's a 7, Gianluca not yet, 5, Darren, Brad 2, Brendo 2, Paul 7, Tamara in theory an 8. Interesting. Shane an 8, 5. Thanks. Yeah, Dennis 7, Gabby 7. Tom, I've done a review on the management chain. Shows key stakeholders have tangible actions and clear direction, have CCM framework. That's very good, mate. Nice one. Aaron a 5. Okay. Brentner a 7. Okay, so we talked about the process. If we don't have some type of flow chart or process we follow, it just creates a cluster. Talked about the criteria, some things to consider, and I walked you through a client that pretty much halved the work they did in critical controls to get it back to a critical few. And so again, the question is, what impact would it make if you had this objective process and allowed us to get to a maximum of 5? Well, that's my suggestion anyway, into your critical control management process and into the workload that's created in the verification space. And if it would have an impact, then again, you've got a choice to make. You can continue doing how things have been done or look to tweak and apply these frameworks. So closing this out, we apply a robust selection process and select the critical few, gives us a better chance in getting critical control management right. All right, the third and final bit here is around the idea of once we've got our critical controls, that we define the performance that we expect. So have you ever been in a scenario where something really bad has happened and you're thinking like, how did this happen? We've got controls in place. Surely they would have worked. What failed? And I've been there, unfortunately, at least twice with the ultimate price that someone paid. And in those scenarios, and this might sound very similar to what you're seeing, You've got critical controls, but they're not effective. They were put in place 2 years ago, but now like no one even knows about it. So it's just over time, it's just dropped away. We do ad hoc checks at best. Frontline has no idea. Who knows who's responsible, who's accountable? What do we do if it fails? Some of those things might be very familiar. And where we want to be is that we had absolute clarity in all those areas. So who's responsible for what in relation to critical control? Other things like how could it fail? What have we got in place to stop it from failing? And we have clear, easy, simple reporting on the effectiveness of our critical controls over time. And one of the key strategies and tools we can use is a critical control performance standard. So what is it? Now, some of you on the line, I'm pretty sure know of them or have them in place, but I'll do a quick poll. Actually, let's just do that while I go off. Quick poll. Whose organizations have critical control performance standards in place? Quick yes, no. Aaron's a no. Okay, we've got some yeses there. Brad's starting. Shane's yes. Paul's no. Tamara, yes, I've worked with previously. Shannon, no. Okay, so we've got a fair few yeses in review. Okay, that's great. Keep an eye on that. So what is it? A structured set of data where we define the performance. Well, there's at least two parts. So one, Tom, I've developed performance standard for the previous company. So I'll go through the first pass. This is in detail what we would expect when we do performance standards, that we define the performance in relation to a number of these aspects. So let's say, for example, if one of the critical controls was the fire sprinklers in the roof, then one of the things would be, okay, what's the percentage availability? We want 100% availability. What's the redundancy if the fire sprinklers fail? Okay, well, we've got the fire extinguishers and fire hose and all that sort of stuff as an example there. So asking all of those questions, and then for each question or each performance requirement that we define, we're going left to right on it to then embed it or make sure it's embedded in our system. So for example, that's what we've covered here. So functionality is one of the requirements. And we said, well, it's going to activate within 1 second of meeting a threshold as an example. So we ask ourselves, well, what's the operational activity that we've got in place right now that makes sure it can do that? Well, we do monthly fire sprinkler tests. Then we say, okay, that's great, but what management system ensures that we do that forever and a day? And we've said, okay, we've got a fire management plan, and we've also got a recurring work order for that. And then we enshrine it as an owner or who is responsible for those things that are left to right. And we see great value when we go through this process of that left to right. So yes, we might have these things we want to aspire to, but we haven't embedded it within our systems. So that's part of the journey. And then inside here, we're also talk about TARPs, so triggers. And in here, this is when we map out our verification strategies, how we're going to check this thing, check on them over time. But I can't unpack performance standards here. Some of you might know Josh Bryant from Mitchell's. So this is around, another case study where they've applied it. They've done a lot of great work. If you ever want to know more about from a contractor perspective on what they've done, he's a really great guy. You can let me know and I can get you in contact with him. They are able to embed it within their systems, and they're actually able to then piggyback off some of their existing checking activities. So let's say supervisor drill pad inspections to then flow into some of their verification works and strategies. Okay, so that was quick, 1 to 10. So I guess if you don't have performance standards, then you're probably just going to answer a 0 or 1. But if you do have performance standards, just with that quick run through, where would you put your health of your performance standards or performance standard process? So Brad's a 1, Matt's an 8, Jen Luke is a 1. Okay, if you're at the start of the journey, Paul's an 8, Russell's a 7. That's good. Darren, Tamara, and Neil, yes. Shane's a 6. Okay, Aaron's a 6. All right, that's good. 3 years ago, if I asked that same question, it would be lots of zeros everywhere. Okay, so you get the gist. If you don't have performance standards, then hopefully you're on the pathway on the journey too. Get rid of that. If you do have performance standards, you identify an opportunity for improvement, then there's an opportunity there in that space as well. So we know performance standards They are the bedrock, in my view, of the verification program, and also the bedrock of the long-term performance of the critical control. So we want to have those in place. Okay, another question. Been through a bit of content, now starting to move into the wrap-up phase. What's your biggest aha moment, or what's the biggest idea that stuck with you just from going through that content very quickly? This is an opportunity now to just reflect on the content. A few things might have come up. What's the one thing that's stood out for you? What's one of the things? GM, yes, maximum 5 controls. Again, that's not based on science. That's just based on workload. That's a good one, mate. What else? What do some other people fall out? Nick, becoming so big we don't understand what we are all doing. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I won't rip off that one, Aaron. Time to reflect on the ICMM. What is a critical control now that we've identified and worked through what we've got? Yes, Brendo, trimming it to the important ones, not just setting and forgetting. 100%. Brad, decision trees to define actions. Yes, Shannon, cross-section of workforce engagement in developing these controls is often underrepresented. Yes. All too many roadblocks, stop workflow. Another Paul, some of the controls are not actual critical controls. So yeah, that'd be an interesting exercise to do. Clear definition control tomorrow. Tools for create controls can help simplify. That simplicity means a lot. Anthony, integrating stat verifications. Yes, absolutely. John, complexity doesn't mean you're achieving success. Yeah, don't get me started on that one as well. Shannon, update site researchers. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Keep moving forward. That's some gold. And if I get a chance to come back to that. So we won't do the whole of company rating. So look, obviously you've come here, you either want to learn a bit more about critical control management, you're doing some stuff, you're curious, whatever. And thank you for joining me. And what we do know is that we need to make sure our critical controls are smart. They need to be true controls. That's point one. We need to apply a robust selection process to get to the point of what is a critical control, not to pull the rabbit out of the hat. And critical control performance standards are a key foundation in that process. So the obvious question is, how do I do it? You can do it the way I've been doing it for like the last 10 years, trial and error. Or you can look for how can you shortcut that process and save yourself a lot of heartache and trial and error. And so I mentioned right at the start, there's an opportunity here on how you can get more information or more help in this space. And what I've managed to do, and I've worked pretty hard on it, is put all of our stuff around critical control management onto an online platform. And it's like 40 minutes of videos and all the tools and templates is all there. And you can grab that and pretty much move forwards and execute your critical control management pathway. So it's certainly not for everyone. So if you're well on the path, you've got all the tools and techniques and you're like going through this, tick, 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 then all good, you got it nailed. But if it's your organization or where you are, it's like, well, we've got some stuff in place, we're not sure, or I haven't started the journey, or I think I could probably learn or add some stuff in, then this would be the opportunity. I encourage you to get involved. For me, it's all about, you're probably seeing us, we're about saving lives at work. And I'm sick of having to do these same conversations all the time, get asked for the same info. If there's a way we can short circuit that process, then definitely that's what I want to do. No worries, Shannon. So what is it? And let's briefly touch on it. It's essentially, we've got all of those tools that we went through. We've got all of those as discrete templates. We've got how-to guides and walkthroughs on all of those things to get you to the point where you can just move forwards and apply them and execute. And one of the ones which I get asked about a lot, I toyed about whether I share it or not, but it's like, just do it, is in there too, is our list of generic critical controls. And that's normally our consulting clients use that because that's a great library for them to either cross-reference against what they've come up with. Okay, we come up with this. How does this compare to the rest of the industry? Do a cross-reference. Or we've also been using it and helping clients that have nothing in place at the start of their journey. So what they're doing is they're taking that, putting them in place as a stopgap measure, then doing that design work over the next 1, 2, 3 years, going top down to get to the more bespoke stuff. So that's certainly in there as well. So anyway, you can read that, the benefits. I was thinking about this morning. You can get it in 40 minutes instead of the 5 years like it's taken me. Another one is you don't need to engage expensive consultants like myself or others that are getting around the industry. it's $100. You get all the stuff, and it's self-paced. You get everything there, and you're getting into all that skill set. So that's what it is. I'll put the link in the chat shortly, and we can ask some questions about that. And for the next 7 days, that's when the guys have set up the discount. So I'm just going to put that into the chat and then move on so we can get to the Q&A. Put that there. So yeah, encourage you to check it out. Also, what we found is not everyone can get to our 2-day masterclass, which I'll talk about, but this is something that gets them through. So speaking of the masterclass, so I made mention this right at the start that we've only talked about here. And the accelerator that I've sent you the link to really walks you through this end-to-end, the how-to, the tools and templates. So you'll be able to nail that area. What it doesn't do, it doesn't cover off the whole pathway. So if your organization doesn't have all of these other aspects in place or is on the journey for that, then the link I've just sent you doesn't help with that. But that's where we offer our 2-day critical risk management masterclass, where we go through end to end this whole framework, cover off all of these tools and techniques, give the templates over, the how-to guides, so that the participant can walk away with knowing, okay, how do I do a critical risk management framework? What does good look like? And moving forwards with that. We even have our templates for performance standards. So if that one's of interest to you, yeah, thanks, Brad. Yeah, we've got the 2-day courses, only one left this year because I'm just smashed with Client Works, and it's in Brisbane on the 10th and 11th of December. So what I will do is I'll just get the link there as well, where you can see that. Just let me get the link. I'll jump that in there. It's a maximum of 12. We've already got 4 people who are on there. No worries, Shannon. Thanks, mate. I'll put the link in there as well. So yeah, encourage you, if that's where you are, where your organization is, then jump into that, get involved. We've been running it for a while, Brad. Thank you for, is this available virtually? Unfortunately not, Tomo, but I'm working, actually name's Tomo, I'm working on being able to put this whole framework online. I'm chipping away. I'm doing this one first because that's what everyone's focusing on. And then over time, going and putting all of that on there. Mikkel. All right, thanks. I saw Tom, so I was going with that. Apologies, Mikkel. So that's that one there. Look, we've run around the country. Encourage you to get involved in that one as well. And for those that have jumped on, then yeah, there's a webinar discount. We'll send the link out. Satisfaction guarantee. You don't need to worry about all that. Okay. So questions. I can spend some time now. If someone has a burning question, put it into the chat. I will stay on the line after the end of the hour as well, because I love talking about this, and sometimes we have some really cool conversations. But if anyone has a burning question, put it into the chat, and we'll chat for about 5 minutes, and then we'll do the wrap-up bit at the end. I'll keep an eye on there. So I think who one of this? Yeah, okay. I think Russell, you might have mentioned this one. Yeah, so what I've been sharing is mirroring what industry has in that. And so in the 2-day course, we go through what the rest of industry is. So I'm pretty confident in where people are at with critical control performance standards, with critical controls, and even with bow ties as well. So if you execute the process I just went through, you'll be in the top 10% without a doubt in relation to critical controls. Thank you for those that are jumping off. Or wish I could get to Brisbane. Yeah, maybe you can ask, mate. I might do one virtually next year. All right, Gianluca, do you find that some risks still require more than 5 critical controls? That's a really good question. And what we end up doing, that's interesting. So in the critical control accelerator that I gave you guys a link to, I have a module about, well, what do you do if you've got more critical controls, or how do you distill that down? And so one of the items we talk about in there is, if you, again, let's say the maximum of 5, if we apply that across 30 risks, then it doesn't mean you can't do some horse trading to say, based on the type of risk it is, well, let's say if it's vehicle interactions, well, we might say there's 7 critical controls, and for snake bites, we might have 3 or 2. So I want to average across the suite. We still might end up with the 5, but also that can then cater for, because not all risks are the same, we know. That's a mechanism that we use. It's really just driving the 5 to at least have some type of ceiling that we're managing against. Hopefully that answered it, mate. Brett, a control which acts just after the point of loss of control, but before that energy is released, is a preventative or mitigating control. A control which acts just after the point of loss of control. Yeah, okay. I follow you. That's a nice technical question. All right. What I might do is do the wrap up and then come back to these questions just in case people need to go, because I'm happy to unpack those ones. All right. So we will actually send you out an email. We're going to get this recorded and trimmed down. We'll find a slot on the interweb where it lives with the slides as well. And we've got a critical risk management audit checklist as well in there. So we'll send that out to the people that jumped online. Yeah, feel free to forward that around. Also, it'll be in there as the links to those courses. So one, the accelerator, we can just buy that, just start literally today if you want, and getting through that pathway. And then also the critical risk management masterclass for that one in December. So as I said, the slots are filling up. You know where to find me. So thank you to those that need to go. Thank you. To those that are staying on the line, I'll jump into these questions in the chat and happy to talk about any other questions that aren't yet in the chat and go from there. So